I think in all of this, ask the question, why scale? And what I would assert is that if you have a wonderful product or service, then you have an obligation to scale. If you truly want to bring more value to the world, make a greater impact with less dependence on you, then scale. But don't do it at the sacrifice of your own health and well-being. Don't do it at the sacrifice of important relationships. We talk about summiting your own scale Everest, whatever that might be. It's going to be relative to you and where you're at in your business journey. It is pointless getting to that summit if by the time you get there, you are a fraction of your previous self. Your health's in bits. The team you've dragged up there are strewn all along the mountainside, looking at you saying, why the hell did you bring us up here? And your closest relationships are in tatters. It's pointless. You won't find happiness at the top of that in terms of a revenue number. But you can do this in a way that preserves your health and well-being when you're intentional in doing that. There's huge fulfillment in actually challenging yourself to do something that requires you to get out of your comfort zone.
Brendan Mcgurgan, thank you very much for coming in.
You're very welcome. Absolutely delighted to be here, Connor. It's taken a little while, but we got there.
It has, yeah. And as we just talked about, right? I much prefer to do them in person, so it really is great to see you. We've had a good chat so far, so I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah, likewise.
Let's start with simple scaling. What is it? Is it a program, etc.? Just in your own words, what is it that you do?
Well, let me start with Simple Scaling's vision, which is to inspire, connect, and enable millions of ambitious leaders of small to medium-sized enterprises to scale with purpose. So that's our vision. Our purpose is to free leaders to flourish. So how do we do that? At its core, our signature offering is a 12-month program to coach SME leaders, founders, who have a desire to scale, or maybe have a desire to get out of their business, to work on their business instead of in the business. I appreciate that's cliched, but for a lot of people, they get trapped in their business. Or you have those second generation leaders who have never had any exposure to other leaders. It's cohort based, typically 10 to 12 leaders. So they have a desire to listen to someone other than the parent who founded the business. You have those who we call them graduates, those who have started a business, got to, let's say, £1 million in revenue, and understand that things have to change. What's got them to here won't get them to there. So we have many graduates, let's say, who come into the program. So the 12-month program is our signature program. It's our ScaleX Accelerator program. It's an in-person program. Alongside then the program, we've created an ecosystem of support. So we might get into it, but two of the greatest challenges to scaling, or the impediments to scaling, one is access to finance. So we established a small investment fund at the back end of last year, off the back of a very successful syndicate, which we had established for a couple of years. So we are able to support those SMEs who require finance to scale. And we only mandate that they're either a graduate participant or about to be enrolled into our program. And alongside that, then access to talent is cited as another impediment. So we have a small recruitment arm of the business, our ScaleX Talent Solutions arm, so to support and prioritize the talent needs of those who, again, come into our ecosystem. So essentially, we have created an ecosystem of support to enable those SMEs who have a desire to scale and ambition to scale.
You mentioned there about this idea of working on the business rather than in the business is a cliche, right? And it is actually, and when you were saying it, it is a cliche, but no matter, even when I started my own business, right, I thought, I'm not going to get stuck working in the business. This is ridiculous. And then 3 or 4 years in, I've read all the books and everything, and I'm pulling my hair out because I'm stuck in the business. It happens to every single business owner.
Yeah.
Why does it happen, do you think?
Well, what we see, and we term these archetypes, growth prisoners. So someone like you, Connor, who has had a desire to start their own business, maybe see the way the industry in which they're operating could be different, maybe wants to empower themselves, have this sense of freedom to do something on their own. They don't want to be employed and be directed anymore. And maybe they see an opportunity to create more value than is currently being created by their existing employer. So you start this business and it's your baby and you have your hand on every aspect of it. So you're out winning the business, you're delivering the business, you're following up, ensuring the customer success. You're maybe in the evening time putting invoices onto QuickBooks or Sage. You're looking after some of the legal contracts. You've your hand on every part of the business. Your fingerprints are all over this business. And so we very quickly create habits of just doing stuff without ever taking time back. So very quickly, 12 months goes, 24 months goes, 36 months goes, and you're still doing the things that were required for you to get this off the ground. You bootstrapped, you hustled, you've got it to a certain level, but your calendar reflects the behaviors that were required 3 years ago without you ever stepping out of the business to work on the business to think, actually, should I be doing that? We had somebody in our program, actually, it was about 3 months ago. We invite those leaders who participate in our program to an activity inventory. Very, very simply, literally to keep a timesheet of what they do. And this lady who is running a hotel group, they've just acquired their 7th hotel, discovered that she was still ordering the cappuccino cups. She'd always ordered the cappuccino cups, and it had become so deeply embedded in her behavior, in her habits, that she never had stopped to think, should I be ordering the cappuccino cups? And she's running a 7 hotel at 7 hotels across a group of
And
hotels.
it's probably easy for someone like that, right? I can even think of some things that I'm doing now that I shouldn't be
Yes.
doing, right? But I just think, oh, it'll only take me a minute and it'll take me longer to explain it to someone
That's
and
the
blah, blah,
trap.
blah. Yeah, you know, that's
That
it.
is the trap. And ultimately, this is why when we get into maybe the ScaleX operating system, processes and systems, anything that you're doing twice, there should be a process. And then you've got to discern, is this activity playing to my unique ability? Is it operating in my zone of genius? I had Gay Hendricks on the ScaleX Insider podcast, wrote the book called The Big Leap. And often we operate across what we're good at, what we're excellent at, what we're really competent at, and then we operate within our zone of genius. It's what is unique to us. We don't typically value it because it's natural to us, but others can see the value of it. But what happens with those startup founders, they become very good at lots of things. So they fall into the trap of, well, it'll only take me a couple of minutes to stick those invoices on. It'll only take me a couple of minutes to rattle through that contract. And you never stop to think, should I be now delegating this? Should I be outsourcing this? Is there or should I be should I stop doing this? Is this actually creating value within the business anymore? And does it play to my unique ability? I often invite founders to just divide your revenue by the number of hours in a year, and you're going to get your hourly rate. Now, you shouldn't be doing tasks, and typically a founder of a business, like their hourly rate whenever they do that is going to be like €500 an hour. They shouldn't be doing €15 an hour tasks. So it's why taking time out to work on the business and not in the business gives you that thinking space to actually have these conversations. Though, actually, I'm going to be intentional this week to stop doing one thing, to delegate something, to outsource something, and create space for me to continue to expand my vision. And this is where they get trapped, because ultimately they can't see scaling as a way out. They say, well, how can I scale a business? Are you expecting me to do more? And I'm already snowed under with what I'm doing. Scaling is an intentional decision to actually change what you're doing and start doing things in a different way. Growing is doing more with more, scaling is doing things differently through leverage.
Is guilt ever a factor with someone, they kind of know what they're good at, right? And they know, but there's just something that they almost feel like they need to punish themselves with ordering the cappuccino cups or whatever, you know? Is it a factor?
Well, we grew up in Ireland. I'm 51 years of age. I grew up in the Irish Catholic Church. It's just full of guilt. We're born with sin. We're not worthy to be here, and you've got to punish yourself for the rest of your life until you might get a ticket up to the big gates before somebody might let you in. So it's just our society is just riddled with guilt and shame. And why would I do? Why would I pay somebody else to do something that I can do myself? I mean, that was a mantra that I heard whenever I was growing up. And I grew up with a mother who, made all the food, baked all the bread, washed all the clothes by hand because there's a great deal of martyrdom in that. Um, when I was one of five, made clothes. So when you're growing up in that and steeped in that, your first thought is, how can I do this myself? Rather than thinking, who is the person that's more competent out there that will do this? And you think of the benefit of that, Connor, when you approach an activity or task with not how can I do this, but who is better placed out there to do this? If you get stuck in how tasks that actually are depleting your energy, it leaves you with a lot less energy and passion and motivation to actually scale the business and bring value to your customers. But if you're continuing to do tasks that bring you energy, that are playing to your unique ability, you're operating within your zone of genius, you're constantly energized by those tasks that others might look and go, oh my God, I would hate to do that. Pete, we're both from a finance background. I have my own accountant. Like, I hate preparing my self-assessment return. Something that I could do very easily, but I don't like to do it. And at 51 years of age now, I've decided I'm not spending another minute on this planet doing stuff intentionally that others are better placed to do that I don't want to do.
Is that mindset, like, how important is mindset when you come into this? Because I'd imagine if and you very kindly brought me a book, and I will just show it to the camera there just to give you a little bit of a plug and advertisement. But in researching this, I saw that there's kind of I wouldn't say 10 steps, but there's 10 kind of principles, right, to scaling. So going into that, it's probably not as easy as I'll just tick off number one, tick off number two. But is there a mindset shift that kind of has to happen for most people to embrace this?
100%. So the very first principle, so it's a principle-led framework, it's a principle-led operating system. And we spent 2 years actually speaking with successful scale-up leaders across the globe, people who have been there and done it, like leaders in Gymshark, for example, Skyscanner, more locally, Kainos, Brendan Mooney. And it's understanding that what got you to here won't get you to there. It's a Marshall Goldsmith quote from his book. Psyche's everything. We talk about it's 10 P's. So psyche, mindset is everything. The mental lens by which we see the world, by which we interact with the world, by which we interpret the world. And that mindset is either empowering or disempowering. You can only ever be in one of two states, an empowered state or a disempowered state. Very, very simply. To scale a business, you've got to be consistently more in an empowered state. So it's recognizing when you are saying things to yourself or out loud that are potentially limiting your scaling trajectory, your scaling ability. Things like, sure, I can do that, it'll only take me 10 minutes, is a limiting belief. Why would I delegate that to somebody else whenever I can do it? Why would I outsource that, pay to outsource that whenever, I've done it for the last 12 months? The other one is, well, I've tried to get somebody to do it before, but I can't get the people. is one I hear constantly. I can't get the people. When I then push back and then say, you've 20 people in your organization at the moment, are any of those people good people? Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, they're all really good people. So you have evidence that you can get good people. Oh, yeah. Uh, but what we find is that leaders will only ever scale to the ceiling of their own belief system. If you believe that you can only scale this business to, let's say, £5 million, or that you're the only person that can do the sales, you're the only person that can do the delivery, that's this ceiling by which this business will start to butt against. And then if you've people within your team who have joined a business to scale a £20 million business, then they're not going to stay around because they're going to be butting off against you very, very quickly. And this is why, from a scaling perspective, you've got to start to change the way you think. You've got to recognize that at each stage, you've got to take on a new identity in the context of the identity being the summation of your beliefs. So anytime you're experiencing friction within your business, don't look at others in the context of I want them to change. Think about what you're doing, how you're thinking, how you're speaking, how you're behaving that potentially is leading to that friction. Every time there's a piece of tension or friction, be intentional about actually looking inward before you look outward. I always said clarity on the inside creates momentum on the outside. When you get clear about what is empowering in the context of your scaling vision and what is actually holding you back, what is limiting, then it's this constant audit of, I'm going to keep and hold on to that belief system. That's going to serve me in the next stage, but I need to get rid of that one. That one was fine. That hustle mentality, that kind of bootstrapping, that doing everything and kind of getting the ego stroke from being able to do everything. And people looking at you, God, isn't it amazing? You do everything. That, wow. Recognizing that at different stages, you're going to have to let go of certain beliefs and actually take on new beliefs, which ultimately create a new identity at the various stages of scaling.
Take me back. Let's just talk about your background for a minute. So there's plenty of people out there, business coaches, scaling experts that have never actually scaled a business, right? I've never really been in the coal face, right? Which is it's very different, right? To kind of being academic about it. So just tell me a little bit about your experience there. I'd read that you had scaled the business CDE Global. 25x revenue. It's a big bump for anyone, right? What was that like, and kind of how did it all start?
Sure, and I would agree with you. It's really important for me to be authentic in what we're coaching. So everything that we've written about in our Simple Scaling book, everything that we coach upon, I live it. I've lived it. I've made lots of mistakes along the way. So anything that we recommend in terms of the tools, the guidance, the principles, I've lived these. And what compelled us to bring the book out, for example, was I never had a handbook for scaling. In fact, whenever we were doing it back in the day, scaling wasn't even a thing. It wasn't part of the business lexicon. So we can get to kind of the reason why I felt compelled then to write the book along with Claire and create the program. So prior to that, I've been involved in more than now 10 businesses where I've co-founded, built, led them, including the previous business which you mentioned, which was CDE Global. Prior to that, I qualified as a chartered accountant. I was the middle of five. My mum and dad weren't educated, and the mantra at home was just get educated, get a career, get out of here. So we've all a qualification of, and mine just happened to be chartered accountancy. As soon as I qualified, it got out into business during the technology boom and bust. You're too young to remember that. Back in the 2000s, the days
I
when
was alive.
yeah, we watched the internet being invented here. We know the world. I think we're the last generation to know the world pre the internet and before the internet. So I was involved in that. As soon as I qualified, got out into business, became group financial controller of a technology company, and we scaled that. And then with every good boom, there's a bust, and hence why I ended up in a small engineering company. I joined it. The founder recognized, to his credit, that He was really good at the design, the engineering piece. He enjoyed the selling piece, but didn't want to do any of the other bits. He recognized that at a very early stage. So I was brought in the finance side, but very quickly got involved in all the different aspects of the business, which is why I became an MD and then a shareholder of that business a number of years later. It was doing about £3 million revenue. Most of its clientele, most of our customers were in Ireland, and we had 15 people operating out of a small industrial estate in Cookstown in Northern Ireland. And we eventually scaled that business to become number one in its category globally, set up offices across 6 continents. Prior to leaving, we had about 700 people and scaled that to over 9 figures in revenue.
And obviously, when you talk about it like that, right, it sounds great. It was all kind of up and to the right, but even
It
like,
wasn't.
yeah, right. And I'm
Not at
assuming
all.
you've learned some of these lessons, right, that are in the book the hard way, right?
They've all been learnt the hard way, Connor, because the reality is there was no handbook for scaling. There was no handbook for CEOs. I was a new CEO in this business. So I was taking the belief system that I had from the finance background, which is that you lead people through spreadsheets and numbers to actually bring this to an MD role, which I found to my detriment that's not the way you should lead a scaling business. You've got to really engage the hearts and minds of people to go on the journey with you. And whenever I became MD, we within 6 months of taking that role and announcing a £100 million vision, the world collapsed. Again, you might be too young to remember this. The global financial crisis just ripped the very heart of the business out. So the vision went out the window, ripped up. Our purpose was survival. It was simply a case of bringing the entire team at that stage into the boardroom and saying, folks, I have no idea how long this is going to last. My job's in as much danger as yours is, but this is a room full of incredible people. And I feel if we roll our sleeves up, we take some really challenging measures right now, we'll extend our cash headroom, extend the runway, give ourselves the greatest chance, the greatest probability of actually navigating through this and coming out the other end stronger. And ultimately, that's what happened. So to your point, all the lessons learned, all the lessons captured in the book, they've been learned from operating in the trenches. I know no other way.
What's the hardest part, like for you personally, right, going through that? It can be very difficult to go into a room when you're not sure yourself, right? And there's uncertainty to try and encourage people to roll the sleeves up and let's get ahead of this. Like, was that difficult, or did you find other parts of the journey kind of more difficult for you?
Yeah, interestingly, that wasn't difficult because every time anybody put on the TV or read a newspaper, the global financial crisis and the devastating impacts of the global financial crisis were screaming at everyone. So I didn't have to create or fabricate this, oh, quick, there's a fire happening. We need to cut costs, and people go, oh, or we're in a really competitive market. We need to buckle down here. And the reality is that that's not the case. Where this was everywhere. If we hadn't addressed it, I think that would have been more alarming for people. So the fact that we were and my approach has always been open, always be transparent with people. You're hiring in mature adults here, just be open, be honest, be transparent, recognize where you are, give them hope and inspire them that we can navigate through this challenging time. Look them in the eyes, tell them that you believe in them, and our culture was much stronger at the other end of this. I think from a cultural perspective, culture's really created in the hard times. It's not in the easy times. Everyone can tell you how wonderful their culture is in the good times. Culture's really tested in the really difficult times. And actually, something that we did during that time, we called it Project 35. I was really open. I said, folks, we're going to have to take some measures. we're going to lose some people right now. We're going to cut once. And that's it. But all of you here now, we're retaining you folk. We believe this is the team to support us navigating through this. But we've got to take £35,000 out of our cost base on a monthly basis. Now, rather than me imposing that on the team, I'm putting it over to you folk. Can you take 1 week to get together and come up with a way of taking £35,000 out of our cost base? And a number of the managers presented back at the senior leadership team meeting the following week, and had actually presented a really strong case for how they would take £35,000 out of our overheads on a monthly basis, and that became known as Project 35. And Project 35 became a cultural drum that we beat whenever we became very successful, and new people were joining a very different business at that stage, and we would then cite back to Project 35. This is the way we do things. We're innovative, we're creative, we use our initiative, we don't waste cost where there's no need to waste cost. This is a cultural drum that we continue to beat. So in many respects, it was easier to navigate through the global financial crisis than actually navigate some of the challenges whenever we became really successful. Because people start looking inward then. People started looking to, oh, well, he got a new laptop. Why am I not getting? Oh, I see another new company car in the car park. What about me? And so those conversations become more challenging than the conversation that happened during the global financial crisis, I feel.
Tell me, so from 15 people, say, up to 700, right? It's a lot of lessons learned along the way.
Yeah.
What were the kind of key unlocks for you in terms of what's now being kind of encoded in your system? What were the key things there that you went, this is what I should have been doing. This is the what got me here won't get me to there, and this is the unlock for what's going to get me to there.
It's all captured in the 10 principles. It was to begin with, to look at me. What did I have to do? I became the MD at, I think it was like in 32. Came into the business in my late 20s, MD in my early 30s. Left the business in my mid 40s. So I was a different person in each of those decades. In the early stages, I probably thought that I had all the answers, and I didn't, and I wasn't leveraging the talent and the different perspectives within the incredible team that we had. So I learned that along the way, that you must look at yourself first before you seek to want others to change. And I'm a big believer in the lead self first before you lead others, before you lead an organization. So that's a nod back to psyche again. We go to the second principle, purpose and vision. It's about getting people excited and energized around a vision for the future. Folks, look at where we can go here. We're going to go somewhere where we've never been before. How exciting is that? This is what we can do in terms of disrupting this industry, creating opportunities for the company, which is going to create opportunities for every one of us as team members. We have an opportunity to do things differently, to do things better. Really excite them around a vision and anchor that in a strong purpose. Purpose is something that I only discovered along the way. It's become very, very popular now, but our second principle is purpose and vision. So get people excited with a vision for the future. And that's something that a leader can never outsource. We talked about outsourcing in the early stages. The one thing that you never outsource or delegate is your vision. It's your responsibility as the leader of the organization to cast the vision. Now, should you involve people in the vision? Absolutely. If you want people to get involved, then you've got to involve them. So involve people early in that vision. You should have clarity on where it is that you want to go. Paint a picture for people, but allow them to put their paint stroke on the canvas.
Is that how you can kind of get people excited? Like, I'd imagine in a smaller company, it's kind of easier to get people excited maybe. When it gets a little bit bigger, maybe there's people, I'm talking maybe they wouldn't be too focused on their career. Maybe they want to go to work, they want to, they're good at their job and all that, but they don't really have like grand ambitions, or maybe something that's even bigger than them is even too much, or a bit woo woo. It can be difficult to kind of, excite people about the vision.
So it's a great question. And one of my biggest mistakes was assuming that everyone was going to be excited by this wonderful spreadsheet and this wonderful chart that shows us going from 10 to 100. Look, wow, we're going to become a £100 million revenue company. David on the factory floor doesn't care. He can't contextualize what 100 million means. But everyone has goals. David on the factory floor's goal was to take his wife and kids on a summer holiday. And exciting him around the vision translated as, oh, right, okay, so we're growing, so that means my job's secure, so that means I'm likely to earn a little bit more overtime in the coming months because of the projects that we're likely to win in the context of achieving our vision. Oh, can I take Samantha and the kids on holiday in a couple of months' time because I was holding off booking that? Absolutely, David. Oh, that's brilliant. I've always wanted a BMW. Could I change my car? David, this is where we're going. So you've got to translate the vision for people, as opposed to making the assumption that while I'm juiced up about what this graph looks like, and what 100 million might mean for the business, it's understanding what everyone else within your team's energized by. And everyone has a goal. Even if that goal is just to come in 9 o'clock, leave at 5 o'clock, but actually really enjoys, playing tennis in the evenings, you go, okay, well, I need to recognize that. If that's what you're really passionate about, well, then maybe you're not best suited to the company because it's a global company. You're going to be required to travel. So look, that's an easy conversation to have. Maybe this role's better suited for you, but there's no sense us creating friction and putting you into a commissioning role that requires you to travel for, 2 weeks of the month. So everyone has a goal. For somebody else's goal, they're single, they're young, and they want to travel the world. You go, brilliant. Well, guess what this vision enables you to do? Travel the world.
Trust must be a big thing, and I suppose I'm thinking of some people maybe that I've worked with, probably myself included, had a boss kind of said to me, what do you want? And it was like, oh, am I going to tell this person, what I really want? Or am I just going to
Yeah.
say, I suppose trust is probably a big factor in this.
It's huge. And I always say to people, transparency creates trust. So being open with people, say, look, this is where we're going. Is there going to be challenges along the way? Absolutely. I mean, I had to come back with my tail between the legs after I announced the 2010 vision that we're going to create a £100 million company. It's going to be wonderful. Like, how exciting is this going to be? And we're going to dominate the marketplace, in the Middle East, in Asia, in North America, and then having to rip it up in 3 months' time. Well, folks, it's not really like that anymore. So just being transparent and open with people and having conversations like, Connor, what is it that you want? What in 12 months' time, if you're still in the business, what does great look like? You go, well, great looks like, God, I'd love to move from the management to become a leader in the business, and ultimately, I'd like to be a director. And go, okay, well, there's no sense me promising you that you're going to be a director of the business in 12 months' time. I know there's not a cat's chance in hell that you're going to be a director in the business. But if I truly believe that you're on a trajectory here that is actually aligned to what we're trying to do as a business, and it also satisfies your goals, well, then let's have that conversation. But at any point in time where that's not going to be realized, I think you've got to put your hand up and say, okay, we had this conversation back here. Actually, given some of the challenges within the business, that's likely not going to happen. Or we feel that now, given the level we're operating at, there's a competence gap, but we're going to support you in addressing that competence gap because we believe in you. So let's take 3 months to really lock in, address some of the gaps here, and then continue on the trajectory that you want, that satisfies kind of your goal wish list. everyone has goals, everyone has wishes, and it's just being honest with people and transparent with people as to whether they can be realized within the business in the context of the vision that you're on or not. I think when you're open with people and honest with people, that builds the trust. The minute you like I know I know someone very close to me who was working for a company during the global financial crisis. The leadership announced cuts to everyone's salary, and people accept that. I go, yep, fair enough. Global financial crisis happening, and they had the very tearful announcement that this was happening, and 3 days later, the guy who announced all of the cuts drove in £120,000 new Range Rover with wonderfully beautiful alloys. Now that doesn't create trust. So you've got to be very, very careful about not only what you say, but what you're doing in the context of what you've said.
When you became managing director of the business, or maybe when you bought into it, or at some stage, did you have 25x in mind? Like, what was the ultimate goal, and how far did you think out, or was it kind of, I'll think the next 3 years, or I'll think the next year? Like, how far ahead were you thinking?
So initially we announced 3-year vision cycles, so 3-year strategic cycles. So whenever I came into the role back in 2007, we announced a vision for 2010. Now, that was completely disrupted by the global financial crisis. So there was no vision. It was only survival. We navigated through that very successfully. We were a much stronger company out the other end of that.
How many years was that, Brendan?
So we delayed in announcing another vision until 2012. And we announced our Ready for Rio vision. There was a reason for that. I'll come to it, but essentially we waited 4 years before we started to talk about another vision. We can't disguise the fact forever here that we're doing well now. It's time to kind of let the global financial crisis go and get back to charting your own path again. Let's get back out there and create another vision. So in 2012, we created our Ready for Rio vision, and that was leaning on the Olympic theme. The London Olympics happened in 2012. Again, I would advise people, if you're going to create a vision, energize it with a strapline of something that people can relate to. 2012, I don't watch the news, but I deliberately watched during the Olympics, because all the news coming from the Olympic Park, the BBC News, was about medal winning. It was about people achieving goals. It was about people achieving the unthinkable, and it was really positive and energizing. Everybody was bought into the Olympics and the energy around the Olympics, and so we leaned on that to create a Ready for Rio. The Rio Olympics were happening in 2016, and that was a nod to the fact that we, at that stage of the vision, to establish operations in South America, in Brazil. So that was the kind of dusting down the old belief system, the shackles, the impediment of the global financial crisis, and recognize, no, look, let's move forward here again. And then in 2015, then towards 2016, we announced our 2020 vision, which was a 5-year vision. And that was quite significant at that point. But back in 2012, just to give you a sense of kind of what we did back then, we got everyone to participate. We got everyone involved. I held little workshops right across the business, invited people to share what they wanted by 2016, what they thought great would look like, what direction did they feel we should go in. Now, we were really clear about the direction that we were going to go in before we held those workshops, but that was giving everybody a voice and giving everybody a sense of participation in this, giving everybody a sense of agency. And we then took video footage of people talking about the vision. We hired out the IMAX cinema in Belfast. We created little cinema drop stands. When we got a bus from Cookstown, brought the entire company, a couple of buses up to Belfast. We had CDE branded popcorn, and we had the Ready for Rio video, where the stars of that were the team members, everyone within the business. So we had, lots of video footage where team members were being interviewed. They were chatting about the vision. They were chatting about their goals, their aspirations, and they became the stars of that show. So that was the launch of that, and then on the back of that momentum, then we went on to create our 2020 vision.
And Brendan, that's all like really exciting, right? And I'm energized listening to it and go, Jesus, brilliant, and yeah, get the vision and all the rest, right? 'Cause that's
Yeah,
the fun part,
yeah,
right?
it
But
is.
then,
Yeah.
were you worried at all that you were going to get another global financial crisis, or something was going to happen to just derail this thing again? Like, was it in the back of your mind at all?
At that stage, no. In the context of, we had a very strong pipeline. The world felt differently. We felt different as a company. There was a lot of confidence behind what we were announcing at that point in time. And what I've come to realize, we were chatting about this before I came on air. I was 51 a couple of weeks ago. What I've learned is that there'll be some macro events every kind of 8-10 years, from the start of my career. I've seen the dot-com boom and bust, 9/11, the global financial crisis, Brexit, COVID. Now we've got the Iran war. There will always be something. That's the only certainty in business, is the fact that there will be some event outside of your control which will likely disrupt the vision that you've set out. But if you're preventing yourself from putting a vision out there, ultimately you're not going to attract the people that you need to truly scale the business. You can't hold a vision up here and de-risk what you're trying to do by not communicating it. The minute you communicate it, then you're going to attract those people who want to expand themselves, who want to be part of something great, part of something bigger. Think of Elon Musk, the greatest storyteller on the planet. At the moment, what he has done in the context of attracting the best talent on the planet around SpaceX and now Grok, just incredible. The largest IPO in history, $1.8 trillion, and they're losing billions of dollars every quarter. It's mind blowing. We're both from a finance background. You go, sales is vanity, profit sanity, cash is reality. Like, it's incomprehensible to me that this company is valued at this value, $1.8 trillion, and it's losing like billions of dollars every quarter. Because you've got a master storyteller, because you've got somebody out there who truly believes in his vision to colonize Mars, truly believes that he can put data centers, up in space, who truly believes that he's going to kind of provide a passenger rocket for people to go back and ferry them back and forth from Mars. And people are buying into that.
Where do you see people get stuck most on this journey, right? The scaling journey. They come to you, they have all the tools now, and they're in the network and everything, so they have support. But where are most people falling down, do you think?
It comes back to themselves. They're falling down because they're not communicating a vision for the future. They don't have clarity as to what they actually want, what great looks like. They're not necessarily inspired themselves, so they don't inspire others. Then they struggle to attract the people into the business that would really act as the catalyst for achieving great things. They impose plans on people that are their plans, not the people's plans. So ultimately, then what we hear often is nobody takes accountability around here. There's a reason for that. It's because you keep telling them what to do. But if you create a vision, galvanize your people around that vision and let those great people create the plan, then accountability is baked into that plan because it's not your plan, it's their plan.
I suppose, and what I'm hearing is that everything is sort of downstream from this mindset piece, right? And
It
I don't know
is.
if that's right.
You're 100% right.
Yeah, but it's amazing, really. So, yeah, as you've said a couple of times, you're an accountant. I'm an accountant, and in the world of accountants, it's very practical, right? It's very well. This is how you do
Yep.
things, and there's
Yep.
one number goes in, and it comes
Sure.
out the other side, and it's correct. And there's a right and wrong, and it's just there's a kind of a framework there that works.
Yes.
But it sounds like the reality is a little bit less tangible than that.
Back to that old cliched Henry Ford quote, whether you believe you can or you can't, either way, you'll prove yourself right. So in the context of scaling, what typically happens, and it's why when we bring people into our program, we encourage them to create a moonshot vision. Now we've a novel way of doing that. It's not simply, there's a PowerPoint template, now go and create your moonshot vision. Without disclosing what we do and some of the kind of the secret sauce of that piece, which is very, very powerful, we get them to go 10 years out. So that breaks the linear thinking. So if you think of the world that we exist, if we're thinking of a 3-year vision, what do we look to in order to actually create the numbers for the next 3 years? Where do we look?
Mostly last year.
We look at last year and we look at the last 3 years and we look and we put it into a spreadsheet and we say, on average, we grew 12% year on year with a little bit of wind at our back. And, if the Iran war settles down, I think we could probably do 14%. And that then sets the ceiling on the belief. Now, when you break that pattern of thinking by saying, we'll go 10 years out. And let me ask a question. Putting the spreadsheets aside, what do you think you could achieve? What would you want to achieve if you knew you couldn't fail? Oh, wow. Right. Well, if I couldn't fail, well, then we go into North America. We'd have a leadership team that would be deemed as some of the best in the world. We have a culture that'd be revered by our industry and other industries. And you get people, then you kind of free them to speak very openly and honestly and authentically about what it is that they really want without limitation. But what happens, and we're the people who actually put the brakes on this. That we want to know how to do that, and typically we roll our eyes when you hear the visionary speak like this. There he or she goes again with their dreams. How are we going to do this? But if you think of the best businesses on the planet, the businesses that you revere, they weren't built off the back of spreadsheets. Someone came out and said something that sounded audacious, and they inspired others around to actually achieve that. I'm not saying you be reckless with this, but it's ultimately you creating a vision unencumbered by what the last 3 years' results say. Believe that within yourself. That's like, you must believe this. You must truly believe this and be inspired yourself, and then galvanize your people around this to say, no, look, let's just think, how could we? Now, before we let the accountants into the room and kind of they do their spreadsheets, how could we? How could we do this as a team? What might it look like? And then reverse engineer from there. As opposed to looking at what's happened in the past as a predictor of what's going to happen in the future. Actually, vision cast. What do you want to happen? And let's then reverse engineer from there with this incredible group of people and others that we might attract in to support us in this, to see how on earth we could execute on this.
I heard Patrick Collison a few years ago being interviewed, and he said, in his experience, right, that he didn't really realize that, yeah, obviously it doesn't feel great when the business isn't doing too well, but even when the business is doing great, it still doesn't feel, you still never get that sort of release of tension. Would you agree with that statement as such, or was it the same in your experience?
I would. I would. I'll say to those leaders who come into our community, our ecosystem, every level has a new devil. I thought when I got the business to £10 million worth of revenue, that all our problems would go away. No, we just created more problems. I thought then, will they have those problems licked whenever we get to £25 million in revenue? No, that created more problems. When we got to 50 million revenue, I thought, well, that's definitely going to eradicate a lot of this stuff. Every level creates a new devil. It requires you to overcome another challenge. So the reality is the tension never really dissipates. It 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 just presents. There's a challenge will present which requires you to think in a different way, to behave in a different way, to act in a different way, to change, which is very uncomfortable. Like the scaling journey is a journey of constant change. It's a constant, ripping up the old and inventing the new, and that's really uncomfortable. People don't want to change. You take the classic boardroom scenario, and executives come in, and maybe one of their values is innovation, and every month they sit in the same seat, they drink out of the same cup, they're they're eating the same biscuits, and then we're going to have a few slides here on innovation. Innovation means change, but actually our habits and behaviors don't suggest that actually we're changing. Scaling is a constant process of changing, and the change starting with yourself.
Did you had you had enough of the business? Like, why did you end up leaving, or what happened?
Yeah, I went into the business in my 20s, all through my 30s. I was just married when I went into the business. By the time I'd navigated through my 30s, I had 3 kids. Coming out into my 40s, we were starting to think about another vision cycle. And at that stage, I've been 17 years in the business. We went through, as parents, myself and Colleen, a number of challenges with our eldest daughter, Anya, who has high functioning autism. And that was incredibly challenging at home. I was traveling a lot. I was starting to think differently about what I valued in my 40s. And I had an opportunity to sell my shares. And I felt that now was the right time, the appropriate time to sell my shares. And I still had the opportunity to actually retain a part of the business. So myself, one of the co-founders of the business, and another partner in India, we retained the Asian part of the business, which we've now rebranded Seaflow. So I'm still uh, actively involved in the industry and in a business that's operating within the industry, just not on a day-to-day level. So
Do you think, from what you've seen, right? Because you've had your own experience, and then you've seen loads of other business owners. Do you think it's possible, like you were talking there about your family, right? And, trying to balance home and work, and, what you want in life. Do you think it's possible to kind of scale a business, managing to balance that perfectly, and managing to kind of, to have it both ways as such?
the honest answer is no. The business is going to demand certain things from you at different points in time. So even if you're present with your family, you're likely not present. So even if you're physically there, you're likely not mentally engaged with your family. The reality is you can have everything you want, just not all at the same time. So you mentioned the word perfect. Can you get this perfect balance? No. The reality is the business demanded of me at a certain point in time that I be actively involved in supporting and establishing those businesses across the 6 continents. At the same time, my wife Colleen, who was a school teacher, was trying to manage 3 kids. We came to a decision as a family that Colleen would step back from teaching. She finally retired from teaching. So there are certain sacrifices that you will make along the way. But again, I feel when you're open and honest with yourself, with your partner, that there are certain seasons, everything has seasons, and there are certain seasons in life that are going to demand more of you over here, which means you've less time and energy to give over here. Sometimes I'm now very available for my kids. They're 23, 20, and 18. My son is playing soccer full time, so I can't recall the last time I missed one of my son's games. You know, Eh, so I'm very available for the kids now, which means I've made the decision to step back a little bit from the busyness of what it was to scale a global
But
organization.
sometimes like I would forget that even you mentioned that your wife's a teacher, right? Like even in teaching or nursing or whatever it might be, even in a job where you're not necessarily scaling a business, there's going to be periods of very intense work, very busy, where you're more in work than you are at home too. And I suppose it's not maybe as big a trade off. I think in some cases as people make it out to be there can be more work and you can kind of let it take control, and sometimes there's nothing you can do, but there's busy parts, right, in all careers and jobs.
100%. It's a case of deciding what is it that you want. I always pose to people that question: what does great look like in 12 months' time, in 3 years' time, in 10 years' time? What does great look like? What is it that you truly want? And there's a little exercise people can do. It's called the personal wheel of life. And there's components of a life well lived, let's say. Your health and well being is number one. How do you want to be? How do you want to feel in 1 year's time, in 3 years' time, in 5 years' time? And are you prioritizing that now? If that requires action, are you taking action on that now? What how do you want your finances to look? What do you want your relationships to look like? What do you want to achieve out of your career? You what do you want from maybe travel and experiences? And look at kind of 5, 6, 7 components of a life well lived as I deem it, and then decide, actually, do I need to uh, over index on this one right now because this is a priority, which means I'm not necessarily going to give some of the others the same level of focus right now. Maybe I've I've had a couple of years where I've really invested in my friendships, and they're in a good place. But actually, I want more from my career. So I recognize that maybe I'm going to meet my friends less over the next couple of years because I really want to achieve this qualification. That qualification is going to trigger, s- you know, more earning potential. So my finances are going to be in a better place. But I have clarity in that right from the outset. So I know that my expectation is the time that I'm going to invest in my friends is going to be a little bit less for the next couple of years because I'm really going to lock in on my career aspirations, which is going to solve some of my financial challenges, or it's going to help me towards my financial goals. Once you have that expectation right at the outset, then you're not building suffering in for yourself. The problem is if you believe that you can have all of these things, operating 10 out of 10 all the time, you're just building suffering in. Your expectation is never going to be met there. And you're not going to meet others' expectations either. So I think it's really important. I mean, something Colin and I do regularly is our own personal visions. And we come together and go, look, here's what I would like in the next 12 months, 24 months, 36 months. Like, I'd like to travel. Is that also on yours? Because there's no sense me having an aspiration to travel the world if Colleen tired of traveling and wants to actually take time at home and grow vegetables. Again, you're building in suffering there because your expectation's not going to be met and you're going to create friction there. So it's being honest with yourself and answering that question. What is it that I want? and recognize that I can't have everything that I want in perfect balance all of the time.
Given what you're doing now, right? So, this is very much, I suppose, the business you were in previously. You joined it as an accountant, became managing director, but I suppose it wasn't um, yours in the same, it was an expression of you. I'm sure it became that, right? And you became kind of intertwined with it, but not in the same way that Scale X, right, is very much you. Is it? I'll use the expression to prefer. Like, do you prefer what you're doing now? Do you kind of feel a little bit like you've arrived a little bit more doing what you're doing now and kind of sharing this program with people versus what you were doing previously?
That's a great question. I did have a lot of autonomy in CDE. I felt the business, the culture, the values, how the business looked and felt was very much an expression of myself at that point in time. And we were very aligned, myself and the founder and one of the other co-shareholders. We were very aligned. But in my 40s, I started with a blank sheet. So I left the business in 2019, received invitations to have coffees with people. Those coffee conversations were with business leaders who typically wanted to know, what did we do in there? And I became curious as to why that question was constantly coming up. It turns out that less than 1% of small to medium-sized enterprises ever achieve scale. Now, I've always journaled, and I had been journaling for a couple of years about what is it that I want in my 40s. I stepped through a little process, a Japanese concept called ikigai. What is it that I love to do? What is it that I'm good at? Because I love to ski, but I'm not good at it. What is it that I love to do? What is it that I'm good at? What does the world need, and what can I get paid for? And I kept coming back to the fact that I love learning and growth. It's why that I'm sitting, having this conversation with you now. I think the podcast medium and platform is incredible. I think the fact that we can learn from others who are willing to give up their time to share their experiences is just incredible. So, I love learning and growth. I love supporting others in business. I absolutely love business. I love SMEs. I think 99% of businesses by volume are SMEs. They're not sexy and new like startups. They don't get that level of attention. They certainly don't command the attention that the Magnificent Seven do, because they don't have the same budgets. But these SMEs, and 70% of the workforce work in SMEs, are the fabric of our communities, our societies and economies at large. And I just love these SME leaders who are sacrificing so much on a daily basis to serve us, to serve our communities, to serve society. They're putting themselves out there constantly to serve the rest of us. And what we're aiming to do with everything that we do is to help them to flourish, to free them from things that are entrapping them right now, that they don't need to be involved with, to allow them to have the freedom of time, freedom of money, freedom of relationships, and freedom of purpose. So I stepped through that ikigai process to really hone in on what is it that I want from the next chapter of life. And simple scaling really happened very organically. I I wasn't the same person as that 23-year-old chartered accountant, as a 45-year-old. I'd different interests. I had my value system was different. I had different responsibilities. And there are other things that I wanted to do. I didn't want to be labeled as an accountant. That was a part of my life that I'm very grateful for, that provided a conduit into business. It was a passport into business. And it's I'm forever thankful for it, because it's given me the opportunity to really live the life within business that I've wanted to live. But there are lots of things that simple scaling, starting with a blank page, has allowed me to do. It's allowed me to create a wonderful business with Claire, who is just an incredible business partner. Claire was our first head of talent and organizational development within the business, became a director within the business, and the first female board member within CDE. I'm really proud of that, and the fact that I get to now spend every day with Claire in the context of serving our SME clients is just wonderful, brilliant. The opportunity to write a book, the opportunity to have a podcast. I've had almost 200 now guest interviews, speaking to some of the best and brightest people on the planet, people who have scaled multi-billion-dollar organizations, the likes of Alan Mulally, ex-president of Ford Motor Company. When in any other situation in life would you get the opportunity to have 90-minute conversation with the likes of Alan Mulally?
Do you ever, I don't know actually if you'll answer this, right? But given that you've written a book, right, and it's kind of all encoded there, right, you're thinking, is there ever anything you hear, say, from someone like that or on the podcast that you're like, oh, that should be in the book, or that should be in our, you could probably put it into the program fairly easily, but, does anything change your thinking?
I love the question, because it's a question that Claire and I ask ourselves at the end of every program. We're now 6 years into delivering the program. Almost 100 leaders have graduated from the program from across Ireland. And each and every time the principles are affirmed and the sequencing of the principles are affirmed. So psyche, your mindset, we've spoken about it, acts as either a multiplier or an impediment to all of the other principles. The second principle being purpose and vision. So once we've got this empowered mindset, then we can really start to think about this expansive future, anchored in a compelling purpose of why, a clear understanding of why does this matter. Once you've got that and you're inspired by that, then you attract the people. And the third principle, when you've got those people together, those people are going to support you with creating the plan, which is the fourth principle. With that plan, you're going to discern and decide what processes and systems you need to put in place. You asked a question earlier in the conversation, what do people get wrong here? They hold on to things too tightly for too long. They don't put the appropriate processes and systems in place. There's a wonderful quote by Michael Gerber that says, if you have a business and that business is dependent on you, then you don't really have a business, you have a job, and it's the worst job in the world because you're working for a lunatic. So the processes and systems are so critically important. The sixth principle is performance. If you're not keeping score, then you're only practicing. So it's deciding what's critically important in the context of actually measuring our success, measuring our progress along the way. In the context of scaling the business, there's going to be financial metrics like sales growth, obviously, profitability, cash headroom. You're going to then focus on net promoter score of your employee engagement, net promoter score of your customer engagement. You're going to have some measurements around the purpose, your purpose, the impact that you're making on the world, whatever that might look like. Seventh principle is proposition. It's about you clearly understanding what is the value, the unique value that you bring to the world. And can everyone in the business articulate that? Do your customers in the marketplace know why you're distinctly different than your next nearest competitor? When you've captured your proposition, then you can begin to take that into another place, which is actually bringing your wonderful product or service into another geographic region or another vertical, another sector. In order to do that, then you leverage the ninth principle, which is partnerships. That's thinking of the who, not the how. And the entire ScaleX operating system comes together with the keystone principle of creating a positive growth culture. James Clear has a wonderful quote, environment is the invisible hand which shapes all human behavior. And so a culture will either happen by default or by design. And again, from a leadership perspective, what a lot of leaders get wrong is they just allow culture to happen. They'll go and Google, values, stick them on a wall, laminate them, but not live them. So to your question, do we ever think at the end of the program we've missed a piece there, or through the podcast conversations maybe there's a level of confirmation bias in me that I'm hearing what I want to hear in terms of affirming the principles, but at this stage we have never found the actual ScaleX operating system to be deficient in something that is actually critical to scaling.
Brendan McGurgan, it's been a pleasure having you in. Thank you so much for joining me. I feel like we spent a lot of time on kind of the first few principles and not a lot maybe on the other ones. Just before we go, could you maybe just talk about, maybe just pick out one of the things that we didn't kind of quite cover that you think is really important that maybe you came in wanting to chat about today and we haven't really got the chance?
I think in all of this, ask the question, why scale? And what I would assert is that if you have a wonderful product or service, then you have an obligation to scale. If you truly want to bring more value to the world, make a greater impact with less dependence on you, then scale. But don't do it at the sacrifice of your own health and well-being. Don't do it at the sacrifice of important relationships. We talk about summiting your own scale Everest, whatever that might be. It's going to be relative to you and where you're at in your business journey. It is pointless getting to that summit if by the time you get there, you are a fraction of your previous self. Your health's in bits. The team you've dragged up there are strewn all along the mountainside, looking at you saying, why the hell did you bring us up here? And your closest relationships are in tatters. It's pointless. You won't find happiness at the top of that in terms of a revenue number. But you can do this in a way that preserves your health and well-being when you're intentional in doing that. There's huge fulfillment in actually challenging yourself to do something that requires you to get out of your comfort zone. And when you do that, you're going to feel incredible. When you challenge your team and support them to get out of their comfort zone and realize potential that they never felt they could realize, and you're standing at the top of that summit, whatever that might look like, giving each other the metaphorical high five, and your team looking at you as a leader going, wow, I didn't think we could do this. I didn't think we could get up here. Look what we've done. Let's climb higher. That's really, really powerful.
Where can people find out more about you? And again, thank you so much. It's been great, and thanks. It took us some time to get here and everything else, but you're in Dublin today, so it's been a pleasure. So thanks for coming in. Where can people find out more about you and the program?
Well, firstly, thank you, Connor. I think your questions were great. I've really enjoyed this conversation today. Thanks for your patience. I think it's taken maybe 18 months at this stage.
No, I'm delighted to have you. It's great. Yeah.
Look, our website, simplescaling.com. The book's available on Amazon. You'll find me on LinkedIn. I don't think there are too many Brendan Mcgurgans out there, so I'm fairly active on LinkedIn. The podcast is ScaleX Insiders. So if you're want to indulge yourself in all things scaling, you might want to have a look at some of the episodes there. So yeah, that's where I'm hanging out.
Excellent. Brendan Mcgurgan, thank you very much for coming in.
Connor, thank you.